Hey, thanks for joining me for a coffee. So I want to talk about stakeholders today. If you're not familiar with that term, I've totally got you. Stakeholders, they're essentially the folks that you work with on projects who are the project owners or key decision makers. If you're working at a consulting agency, you probably call them clients. If you work in an organization on internal projects with an internal team, you probably call them your coworkers or managers or even just your boss, right? So I've worked with tons of stakeholders in my career on tons of projects. And I have to say, sometimes it's easy and fun. Other times it requires a lot more work and handholding. The one thing I'll tell you about stakeholders is they're not trained in their roles. I mean, think about it. No one ever teaches you how to be a good client or how to be a stakeholder. I mean, I can take that even further and say they might not even know what it means to be a stakeholder. So you know what that means? That means it's your job to identify your project stakeholders, to understand their motivations and intentions for the project, and even to educate them on how your project will run and how you'll need their participation or partnership. It sounds like a lot of pressure, and I know that dealing with stakeholders who are more senior or more important can feel daunting. But honestly, I've always loved stakeholder management because getting to know the people who will make decisions on your project can be fun and insightful. But also, it's pretty important work. You know why? It's because these are the people who can decide to not make decisions and be difficult, or even disengage from your project and completely derail all of your progress. Honestly, the worst is when a new stakeholder comes in out of nowhere and makes a sweeping decision or a comment that affects your budget and timeline. We call that the swoop and poop, because that stakeholder swoops in out of nowhere and just poops all over the hard work that you've done. And guess who has to clean it up? You. So hearing all of this, you're probably laughing. Hopefully you're laughing, but you're also probably understanding why it's important to engage with your stakeholders early on, and really to make sure everyone on your stakeholder team is present and accounted for. So if you're working with a client organization, chances are that you have no idea who the top brass are or even how to get in touch with them. But you want to make sure you're accounting for them in your process because you don't want that swoop and poop to happen. So are they concerned about your project? If they aren't, are they comfortable with someone else on the stakeholder team calling the shots? Get answers to those questions by working with your client or project sponsor to help you determine how the decision-making process will impact your project overall. So whether you're working with a client or an internal team, mapping out their hierarchy and involvement level on the project will help you to make decisions on what you deliver and how those deliverables will be circulated through the organization. So I should also mention this. The size of the client organization and the number of approval layers will affect any plan and how things like feedback, reviews, or even meetings can play out. Of course, not all organizations will be the same size, but the roles in the organization definitely tend to stay similar. You might work with a really small team, but consider asking about the hierarchy in the organization just based on the number of iterations you expect on deliverables. I actually developed a short little exercise to help with this. I created it on the fly in a situation on a project because I was in a meeting with a brand new client team. And when I asked who is your project owner, who is the decision maker, they told me that they would all share responsibility because they were a flat organization, meaning there is no hierarchy. It was all kumbaya.
Kumbaya. Wait, I know it. Kumbaya. Kumbaya. Wait. Oh yeah, I got it. Kumbaya. This is it. Kumbaya.
My response is no. I immediately stopped and I told them that, we need to be 100% sure that we're truly clear on what that means and how the feedback and decision-making process would actually work on the project, because that's the type of thing that tends to put projects over scope and over timeline. You see, I've got enough experience to know that when you don't have this type of thing sorted out, you'll deal with politics, indecision, and probably a little bit of drama. And I've got no time for that. So I went to a whiteboard and created 5 columns on the board. Each column represented a type of stakeholder: the project owner or core group, the primary stakeholders, the secondary stakeholders, the management level stakeholders, and then the executive stakeholders. These are groupings that can represent different levels of stakeholders on a project, from the largest to the smallest organizations that you work with. So I just knew that there was someone else, someone who was not in that room, who had some level of investment in the project. So I asked them to bear with me. I was going to go through each stakeholder type and explain the profile, and it was going to be their job to identify people who fit those profiles. If there weren't folks in every category, hey, no problem. At least we discussed them. So here are the categories. First is the project owner or core group. These are the people who are responsible for the day-to-day success of the project. They came up with the idea and likely the budget for the project. They wrote the proposal or the brief for the project. They found the right team to work with, and they'll hold most of the answers about the project. Your point of contact sits on this team and is responsible for making sure things go well on their side of the project. These are the people in the room in this instance, so it was pretty easy for me. Then I break it down further. First, with what I call the primary stakeholders. These are the people who are most connected to the goals of your project. They're invested in what you're doing and definitely took part in sponsoring the project. One of these people, or even their supervisor, may sit on the core team. In this case, which was a digital marketing project, this was the marketing team in that organization. Then there are the secondary stakeholders. This team may not have written the goals for the project, but they'll be a part of making sure it's a success. Or maybe they have some sort of responsibility for the project. On many digital marketing projects, this might be an IT team or even a development team. Then you get into the hierarchy by identifying the management level stakeholders. These people aren't the doers, but they are the decision makers. Possibly the people who oversee the primary and secondary teams, or even the people who oversee a whole division in the organization you're working with. These people tend to be very connected to the vision of your organization and how the project can succeed. So you want to understand their goals and set their expectations for the project and definitely keep them as close as possible. Then, going further up the ladder, up to the top, you have to consider the executive stakeholders. These people pay the bills. They make all the important decisions, and they can completely deny your project if they feel out of the loop. So do your due diligence and get to know who they are, what their motivations are, and their plans to be involved at points of your project. These people could be C-level or executive level people within organizations. They might be on a board of trustees, directors, or something similar. This means they're not in the day-to-day of the company, but they oversee it. You'll want to think through ways to engage them for sure. All right, so I talked through those levels, right? And magically, this team of 5 people was able to identify all of the people who would be involved at every level of the project from all possible corners of the organization. So we filled every column with at least 5 names, and we were able to discuss how those folks would be involved and when on the project. I knew it. I knew there would be more people to consider in this project. And I knew that flat didn't really mean flat. I knew it was going to make design reviews and final approvals, and honestly, just like every step of the project, a little bit slower and a little bit more difficult. But that was okay. I was fine with that. I'd much rather know about those folks now at the beginning of the project than when we're 75% of the way through. Because at least when you know things are going to be slower, you can plan for it and set expectations about it. But one more thing, you also need to know this. You have to beware the sneaky stakeholder. Always be sure to ask one more time if there's someone you haven't met or should have considered. You want to uncover unknown stakeholders who may be hiding behind the boardroom doors, just waiting to step in at any moment. These people could be deans in colleges, remote board members, executives who travel a lot, the boss's spouse, or anyone else who may not seem obvious to you. Everyone has an opinion, and it's your job to make sure that they're heard at the right times on your projects. So go into it just realizing that these are the people who want the best for the project. And now I'm talking about just any stakeholder, right? But if you or someone doesn't tell them how to engage, then they'll probably destroy your timeline, your budget, and your team's morale. And let's be honest, nobody really wants to do that. It just kind of happens. So be clear about the benefits of getting to know your stakeholder team and about communicating important project information to them at the appropriate times, and you'll definitely have a more enjoyable project experience. All right, that's all I have for today. Happy stakeholder fishing. I'll see you on the next episode where I'm going to talk about stakeholder interviews and how you can get some more project information by doing just a little bit more stakeholder fishing. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on that notification bell so that you can be the first to know when we release new episodes. And in the meantime, why don't you check out my weekly live classes over at teamgantt.com/classes. I'd love for you to join me for one of those free live sessions. Have a good one. Hey!